that about 12 years ago. Employed about 13 people, ended up actually managing people. That's not what I do. So I actually sacked everybody, became self-employed, and re-employed them as freelancers. And that's where I still am today. So that's Fast Network Design. The other one is Joomla. I started Joomla back in 2012, and I'll talk a little bit more about that just in a moment. Where I come from, I actually started out using a CMS back in about 1998 that cost the client €175,000 per year licensing fee. Absolutely ridiculous. I stumbled across in 2002/3 a CMS called Mambo. Absolutely fell in love with it because it was free. I could offer it to my clients, and it just worked, and they loved it. 2005 obviously moved over with the fork that happened in 2005 over to Joomla. 2010, I was invited. I was doing a lot of work within Joomla and the Joomla community. I was actually invited to be the Capital Committee Chair for OSM, Open Source Matters. The prime reason for that was I'd had a lot of scrapes and a lot of learning curves during when I had my actual web agency. So put a lot of time into that. 2012, I came across this thing called Bootstrap. I was really wanting a framework, not a responsive framework. I was wanting a framework that would just help me do things a lot quicker. Then they sort of turned it and made it responsive. And it was the way to go. So I didn't know that Joomla was going to be using Bootstrap. I had no clue about that. It was just pure luck that back in 2012 they started talking about it as well, using it for the actual Joomla back end. So I set up a company called Joomla, and really all that is, it's just a very, very small template club. But the good thing about it is that it doesn't use anything from the core, Bootstrap-wise. Okay, I ignore all of that because the CMS is not updated with Bootstrap, and they may edit Bootstrap to do certain things. So Joomla templates actually use its own up-to-date. So when Joomla update, to 2.3.2 or whatever, okay, 24 hours later, we're on the latest version. This slide here, I'm just showing my family because I'm doing two presentations. And both of my presentations, I'm going to be showing this slide, and at the end, I'm going to say, that's why I'm showing you these sessions, and this is why I do it this way. Just a little one here about my past. I did have hair once. Okay, there's lots of jokes. You may not follow me on Twitter, some of you do, and what have you. There are a lot of jokes about me being bald and not having any hair, and I was never young because I'm so old and all the rest of it. Okay, the one thing that is not actually true is, forgetting the moustache, I was never actually a porn star, but I think I could have made one. Okay, so I'm quickly going to go through and show you. So we've got some time for some questions at the end. Why we wireframe, and why to prototype, and actually not wireframe. It'll make sense in a moment. And then how to actually prototype, and what you need to do to get all of that in place. Little bit of a disclaimer, I don't do wireframes all the time. I would say about 25% of the time, a bigger client will want wireframes first. But the majority of the time, I can, with one of my existing templates, I can alter it slightly, go to a client and say, hey, what do you think of this? And they're like, great, move this to the left, change the colour slightly, all the rest of it. Bigger corporates, they want wireframes, they want to see what's going to be on each page, etc. So, this is not for all of you. You may not wireframe, some of you may do, so hopefully it'll be a little bit interesting and useful for you. Just going to look at wireframing and then why I actually prototype my wireframes. I send this to a client and I have to explain it. Okay, and then they come to me and they say, okay, right, I want another page, and I want another page, and I want another page. It's great, but we actually end up with a huge amount of time that's put into it. You know, and there's so many applications out there that can do wireframes. It just wastes my time. Photoshop, a lot of people do their wireframe and what have you in Photoshop. I'm not a Photoshop person, and my issue with Photoshop is that I can't, you know, if they come back and say, right, okay, we want this 4 columns now, we don't want it 3 columns, you know, I've got to move everything up and squidge it, and it just doesn't work for me. So all of my wireframes that I used to create, you know, they were cheap, they were ugly, they looked horrible, and they took me a hell of a lot of time. The main issue that I had with wireframe in that way was that the client would come back to me and say, I want changes. You know, and I'd end up, you know, going over my budget, just doing more and more changes, and nothing was ever right. So prototyping is the way to go. I mean, the great thing about it is that, you know, we can still make it look like a wireframe, but it's interactive. I mean, I've done drawings before, and I've put them into the browser for the client, and I've sent them across to the client. He's like, this button doesn't work, you know, and I want to click the navigation, and you know, what happens if I go like this with the screen, and oh, you know, it's an absolute nightmare. So what I'm trying to do with my prototypes are you know, make them real. So this is one of my favourite phrases to clients when they say, I want a wireframe. I'll say, okay, you will get a really good wireframe. The great thing about the prototype wireframes that I create is that there are steps that you can do. You get to sort of the end where, you know, they are and you are evaluating it. But if they want to change, it's extremely quick. One thing that I used to use, and this is great, I think it's sort of like yoga talking here, but it's layout it. I would have thought it would have been lay it out, but you know, it works. But you know, the great thing about this is that what we can actually do is we can create a prototype. And what this demo is going to show you here is that, you know, somebody has found a website, they like it, they like the layout. And what we're going to do here, using Bootstrap code, is we're just going to drop everything, you know, drag and drop it, and we're going to lay out a prototype pretty damn quickly for the client. Because the client's come along and said, I like this website, I want to mimic this website, it looks great. Okay, so something like lay it out will give us all of the HTML code. Dead simple. So, you know, not literally, but, you know, we can replicate this as a working wireframe prototype for the client. Okay, getting boring here. What have I done? I've done 2 things. I'm now creating a wireframe prototype in the browser. But the second thing I'm doing, you know, lay it out is absolutely fantastic. You get all this code, you get your Bootstrap CSS and JavaScript and blah, 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 and it works. But we've still got to grab that then and turn it into, you know, Joomlaize it, turn it into a template. So what I've actually done here now is I've created my own template, which is a wireframe prototype. The great thing about this is that the client then can actually hover on things, and he can click things, and he can scroll up and down. You know, we can even get to the point where, you know, very, very quickly, where, in a moment, all of this text, by the way, is actually text. Okay, I'm just using a Google font that makes it into, you know, the grey things. But the great thing here is that, you know, it's not the way to test responsive web design, but just for the client, for demoing it, you know, we can actually show him it is responsive. This is what happens. Okay, so, you know, as we go down through the viewpoints, you know, he might want it to go from 4 to 2 to 1 or whatever. We can actually demo that. And he says, I don't want 4 columns. Okay, I only want 2 columns. we can quickly just go in and rip it out and change the Bootstrap code, all right, to make it 2 columns. The great thing also about this is that, we're showing 1 page here, okay? We can do multiple pages. So we can show the different layouts of all these different pages, how they work, and responsively as well. So when we pull the browser in, excuse me, when we pull the browser in, we can see what's actually happening to all of those module positions. It's really, really simple. Okay, this is just Bootstrap. There's nothing weird or strange or anything at all. Okay, so we have our row. We would have 2 extra divs here because we're doing 4 columns, 4 columns, 4 columns. But I'm just showing one of the columns here at the moment. A couple of CSS classes which will give us a box. Box 1 is a grey box. Box 2 is a black box. We have a height, so we can give the height of a box. And the next thing there is WPhoto. We've got WPhoto, WVideo, etc. And all that does is it just pulls in an image so that they can see that it's a carousel or an image or whatever, a video. So it's really, really simple. The data description here is literally just a sort of like a hover, shall we say. So when you hover over that div, it will just pop up and it'll say featured image or video or carousel or whatever we want. That's the classes that I use. And I'm actually using this quite a lot for clients now. Really simple classes, so I've got my 3 box colors. I've got my text, which I want gray or black. I've got a height, so I can make a box a certain height. And I've got my images, and then also my data description. It really, really is that simple. The great thing about it is that the way I create my templates is that the wireframe has exactly the same module positions as my templates. Okay, so I have a header, carousel position, whatever you want to call it. I have a top position, I have a middle position, I have a footer, I have a bottom 2 or whatever. I have a menu position and a logo position. So the great thing about it is that once I get that prototype in wireframe approved, I can just switch over to this template. Then all I do is just take out my Lorem Ipsum and put in the real content. I take out my images or my div that I put in this class with WPhoto or WVideo or whatever, and I put in my real video or my real images. So that's really, really saving me time because I have a template, a wireframing prototype template that actually mimics the template that I'm potentially going to use. But saying that, some people are lazy. I'm dead lazy. Okay, I actually do some layouts with layout it. Okay, and I just grab the code that's created. The row with the cols, etc. And I just create it on here, and I just copy and paste that into a custom HTML module. It just makes life simple. That's the whole point of what I'm trying to do. One thing I've done is gone a little bit extra, and I'm using JCE. I'm using the template manager in JCE. So I've actually created myself templates in JCE with 1 column, 6 by 6, 4, lots of 3, etc., etc. I've created myself lots of alternatives. I've even created myself the same alternatives again as a video and as a photo and as a carousel, etc. Just to save myself time. So I can go into a custom HTML module, call on the template, pull it in. It's got dummy text in there. It's all marked up ready for me. And I just save it and put it in a module position. Another great thing about it as well is that JCE is that I add the styles. So all of those styles, if you want to do it yourself, you can actually use in the drop-down in JCE. There are some things that are really, really hard to prototype. Okay, for example, that. Okay, these sort of ones I don't prototype. We do it mainly with Photoshop, but on the whole, they're not these one-page, full-screen type of websites. That's it. I'm trying to make it quick because I know we got lunch.